2, 1, live. We're live, and we have no intro. And David's doing something because we have no intro.
Yes,
But this is the Lost
something's
Business Dollar Club, so something's amiss.
yeah,
Anytime you want to hit the intro, Dave. So for
yeah.
all you
Well,
people watching on YouTube.
well, the thing is, I just found this lost dollar. So here
Oh
we
wow,
go.
there you
Found the
go.
You're
lost.
now watching two old farts making noises.
Joe, do you know why some businesses succeed and some businesses fail? Why some businesses grow and some businesses don't? That's what this show is all about. Business, business, business. Wow.
All right.
Well, yeah, it's scary
the-
stuff. But yeah, sorry, Steve.
It's business.
No, I like that intro. I mean, that is
Yeah.
like you wake if you're sleeping and you're driving, that'll wake you up. And if you're going to YouTube and you're listening to that, that is going to certainly perk you
Yeah.
up in the morning to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think
So,
what
I like
we'll
it.
have to try and I haven't quite something went wrong this morning, and that's the great thing.
Apparently.
And yeah, yeah. Well, that's the good and the bad thing about business shows, and business in general. It doesn't always go the way that you thought it was going to go. And
There you
I
go.
was really wanted to make this a well, bam, thank you, ma'am show for intro for Michael. But as you could see, the graphics didn't quite fit the screen. So
There's a little,
Working.
but next time,
Yeah,
but there's
so-
a little space, but we got the
yeah,
audio.
so we either have to come off the screen or we have to do whatever. So my
Right.
apologies to everybody who's jumped on to think, this is the Lost Dollar show, Lost Dollar Business
Lost
Club
Dollar
show.
Business Club.
Yeah,
Lost
it's more like
Dollar
Lost-
Business Club. This is we're replacing the remote work show with this show with the same host, only because we realized that we go off on tangents, or I go off on tangents, and not only do we talk about remote work, but we talk about
Yes.
business in general and business topics. So instead of just concentrating on remote work, which we'll still talk about because it's sponsored by Bendicoot, however, but we figured it'd be better to also talk about what's going on in business and business in general and things that are going on in the world, because everything affects you as a remote worker or as a worker in general.
As a worker in general, yeah, and at all levels. I mean, we've gone through the whole hierarchy. It's not just about remote workers on the end as individual contributors, but also giving advice and thoughts to executives and managers. And it's good that we're covering so much ground in the Lost Dollar Business Club.
That's a mouthful. Say that a couple times fast.
Yeah, well,
So yes, so that'll be it.
let me just explain a little bit as to where this all came from. We wanted to put something up because Michael took us to some incredibly interesting areas which we discovered, with him about business, the do's and the don'ts, and why things happen and why they didn't happen. So we thought, okay, let's expand the remote show and make it into a business show. Well, in order to find the business show which we want to produce for everybody, every name in the whole world's been taken. And somebody once said to me, there must be a lost euro in this business somewhere. And that's always resonated with me through the years. And basically what they meant was that they wanted to go back and look through all their processes, sales, the back end, the whole shebang, and see whether or not, they could save a little bit of money or, maybe even load a little bit more profit onto the products and services. So that was somebody said to me, we're always looking for that lost euro. But
There you go.
because Michael's based in the US of A, so it's a bit of a mishmash of both. So I hope everybody understands why we're doing the Lost Dollar Business Club. It's a business club that everybody is welcome to join.
That's right.
Totally free.
Right.
All you need to do is subscribe, and we hope that we can give you a few tips, and that Michael can guide us through this jungle, this business jungle, and see whether or not we can pick up the odd dollar that seems to be lying around. So
That's right.
that's the end of my little gospel of today.
And that's why you're dressed like a priest. Congratulations. So we're
especially,
very proud of you.
especially if you, especially, well, it's the gospel according to David, of course, as we
That's
all
right.
know.
There you go.
But,
There you go. I love that.
especially
That's
for
my
you.
favorite
You will
book.
find the lost
So,
dollars, the lost euros, the lost rands, any
there you go.
currency you
Yeah.
want. You will find the lost
There you
one.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. So today's topic, because last week we did the don'ts of
No, we did the do's.
work.
We did the do's.
The do's, I'm sorry. This
We
week
did
we're
the
going to do
do's.
the don'ts and
This
whatever
week
else
we
for
did the
tangent we decide to go off on.
Of course,
So.
of course. Well, it's an easy thing to start with, I think, is because we've all seen and done it ourselves, I'm sure, things that were not conducive to building relationships with your colleagues, or mistakes that you made, or oversights that you've seen other people do. And we want to make sure that our listeners and the people listening to the show try to avoid those and learn from things that we've seen and things that we've done that didn't work out. So I think in the remote space, just starting off with just the way you carry yourself and the way you present yourself on screen, knowing where you fit in the screen. I've seen people do where their head is cut off, or it's a mess in the background, or they're not framed properly. So that's one area where I just think it's the basic, and probably one of the most important ones, especially now there's so much video out there, is how you carry yourself on video, and just being very conscious of that.
Yep. Well, and we have guys that do shows with us, and we'll be like, "Can you sit up more? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you, you have to have a presence." And I think whether it's remotely or in person, you still have to have a presence, right? People have to know you're there.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to speak all the time, but you at least have to have a presence. So when they look at you, they're like, "Oh, he's alive," or "She's alive."
Well, one trick on that is actually when you're talking with somebody in face to face in an office, it's great to have the yeses and the ahas to reinforce that you're listening. But in the remote world, when you're doing it on video with the audio, the feedback often doesn't make it easy for you to interject with a yes or an or an aha. And so actually on video chat, I actually recommend that people don't do that, and that they just nod their heads or have some sort of motion, some visual cue, not an audio cue, to prove that you're listening to the other person.
And I think it also depends how big the screen is too. Like, if you have like 80 people, you screwed. But if it's a small group like this, and especially on Zoom, because on Zoom, you can put the screen where you can see everybody, so you can see people nodding or whatever. So usually on video calls, I'll nod or give a thumbs up or something, because if there's someone's making a point. In person, it's easier to interject it, but on video, the problem is 40 people start talking, and then all of a sudden it's like the tabernacle choir. You can't understand it. So it's kind of like when we do this, because we're all remote, we all have to, like, someone starts talking, everyone has to back down. So it's the same type of thing.
It's a dance. It's a dance with the video
Yes.
world, and it's definitely changing. I know it's over the past, now it's been 3 years of people, a large portion of the community being remote. We've all kind of started picking up these tips and tricks about how to manage your presence on the screen.
Right. And I think that's part of what your courses teach, is how to do that as well, but also practice. Like, they have Zoom has a free thing. I get 30 minutes free, I think, every call, or however it works.
They give you 40 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or for whatever, right? But it's free. So if you have to do an interview or you're not sure what to do, I'm sure if somebody has a phone or a laptop in your house, you can literally just do a free Zoom call with them and practice.
Yeah.
Because once again, for some people, this is like terrifying. They have to get in front of people and speak. And it's not that it's no different than if you're sitting across the desk, and it's no different than if I'm sitting in the room with you. It's no different than if you're out with your friends. But because it may be your first time or you're not comfortable, it's kind of like Toastmasters, right? You have to learn to speak in front of people. This is the same type of thing.
Yep.
And that's what you have to learn to do. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I wanted to just reinforce the idea of practice makes perfect, because that's the old adage for a reason, because it's true. And it's actually, I've been in the remote world for 8 years. I know, Stephen, you've done it for decades. David, you too.
Yep.
And it does take, I guess it does, in the beginning, it certainly takes some time, but practicing with your friends and practicing with people that you can feed is a good way to start on that.
Yeah, no, I think it is one of those things where the practice does make perfect, and after a while, it's like the first time you do um, a conference call, or it's the first time you have to make a presentation. It's all about, oh my God, right? And then the initial butterflies go away, and you're like, oh, this is nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is easy. Oh, this is, it's like anybody can do
Yeah.
this,
Then you
and
get used to
it's
it.
just it's repetition.
Yeah. Well, the other
Yeah.
thing is people. So I noticed there have been situations where people new to a remote company or a company that's a hybrid company who are remote, they don't take advantage of the video. They don't go on video when I think they should,
Right.
especially in the beginning when you're first getting to know everybody. Every opportunity to have somebody see you where they can get a sense as to who you are and what you look like, even, and just put that face to a
Yep.
name is, I think, a really important part of it. Because I've seen people come and go in remote organizations where they don't take advantage of the technology and they don't use it in the right way. So then they're not really seen. They're not seen in the organization. They don't have as big of an impact as they could, and I think they're just missing out to connect when there are opportunities to be on video and they don't do it.
I think people
Yeah.
also kind of have to understand that it's okay to be seen. And I think that some people don't understand that. If they don't understand that it's okay to be seen, I think that is an issue. So I think that's part of the issue right now is people are afraid to be seen and afraid to be heard. And I
Well,
think they get a little nervous.
that's an interesting thought. Where do you think? So you think that people are, just to go into this point a little bit more? There's a group of people who are kind of wanting to be in the background, are kind of wanting to think that you can. We call it we call it people trying to hide behind the screen because you're remote, or
Right.
you think that you can not be seen, when really I think for real success it's the opposite. You need to be out there, you need to be connected, you need to be seen as much as you reasonably can. So there
Yes.
probably is a contingent of
And
people
that's the
who are
issue.
not for that.
Right. Yeah, and it's just one of those things. And David will jump. We have David on mute because he's got a background noise that's annoying us. So when David's going to speak, then we'll have to whatchamacall. David will come in. But yeah, I mean, David and I, when we first met, we met on Zoom, and so that's how we've learned. But I've been doing video conference calls since the '80s.
Yeah.
So you have to learn that if you're going to communicate with someone, how that works and how this works and how that works. And it's the same thing with Zoom. But back in the day, it cost like $7 a minute. So you
Right.
didn't rehearse anything. Here it's all free. I
Yep.
mean, and kids FaceTime today and parents FaceTime. And FaceTime is no different, or what Skype used to be, is no different than getting on a Zoom call, whether it's for an interview or with a client. And then a lot of times now you don't even see the people, right? They all wear headsets. And that's kind of like, and not to pick on David, but there's background noise. And I'll say to somebody on customer service, I'm like, you need a better mic. Can you
Oh
replug
yeah.
your mic? Can you do this? And it's like, I think it's okay. Like, one of the states we deal with, they'll always say, how do you hear me? I'm like, I hear you fine. And if they don't, they'll always ask, how are we coming across? And they're very conscious of that. And I think that's part of like, you have to understand, I'm not in front of you.
Yeah.
And you have to also understand, I may not have the same equipment you have. I may not have this. I may be. So I think it's good for someone to say who's a remote person or worker, hey, how am I coming across? Can you hear me okay? Good.
Mhm.
Then they start, and I like that fact that they're cognizant of the fact that it may not be 100%. And then they work with you to make sure that it's 100%.
I mean, I guess what we're really pointing to is a situational awareness, where you have to be aware of how you're coming across at all times, especially in the remote
Right.
world. But anybody who's working, when you're at work in a physical situation, I do go back to the office for meetings about once a quarter or so, and when you're face to face in a person with other people, you just need to be aware of it. And I think there are times when a lot of people just aren't maybe keeping that awareness, or maybe they are aware and they don't mind it. But there's a level of, it's like knowing your personal space, knowing how to shake a hand, knowing when to nod and smile, and when to show a different emotion. So I think there's an awareness is what
But
we're pointing at.
But I don't think, and I don't think people know how to do that. I don't think people know how to press the flesh anymore, or pick up a phone, or do, or whatever. I think that's a lost art, and they're all comfortable now hiding behind the screen,
We got to bring
type
it
of
back.
thing.
We got to bring it back,
Yeah.
Stephen and David.
Well, we do. We press the flesh on all our stuff. David, you're off mute. Anytime you want to jump in. So David has this
Okay,
background
thank
noise.
you.
So when David's not on the
Yeah.
screen, we keep pulling him off and putting him back
Is,
on.
is that better now or not? The background noise?
You know, don't
No,
worry. You're
I
good.
think we're good now.
You're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. Right. Yeah, I
There you go.
suppose
But-
background noise is the
It's a
sort of
perfect
the
example.
perfect example of you know, some people have body odors when you meet them one on one, and my
Right.
yeah, I've got background noise. Yeah. Well,
There you
going
go.
back to what Stephen was saying, I speak to Stephen probably every day, every working day at least, and it's bizarre how we've managed to. Well, certainly, I mean, yeah, he can say whatever he likes, but from my side, that I've built up a friendship with him, and we've never actually met. So it's just being yourself again. You know, he gives me instant feedback, like the mic, for instance, or other bits and bobs. But you can become incredibly important to your clients, even if you don't physically have an opportunity to go and see them. You know, just by regularly talking to them and being yourself.
I mean, that's a really good point about authenticity. I think authenticity is, and maybe it's become a buzzword, and maybe it's one of those concepts that, Stephen, we shouldn't have to talk about, but we do, which is that genuine attitude, that genuine approach, that authenticity in who you are. I mean, of course, you have to bring competence to whatever you're doing, but plenty of studies have shown you also need to bring that warmth or that trust and build that, whether it's in person or remotely. You have to build in those two dimensions. And I think authenticity goes a long way to actually doing that. But how do you teach someone to be authentic? I mean, that's another situation where it comes down to practice, which is, what are you really looking to accomplish? What value are you really trying to bring, and what value can you even bring? Because I think that's a question for people.
I think part of it also is you have to be engaged. Like, unfortunately, like when we do these shows, I'm the one who has to take the notes, so I know what the hashtag, so I'm engaged. But sometimes I'm not engaged, and I always apologize. But you have to be engaged, and if you're not engaged, then you have no authenticity, right? Then they don't feel that you're genuine, because it's like, if you're like this, you're like, oh yeah, that's great, Michael. Whatever you say, oh, look, it's pretty outside.
Which happens.
That's the worst, and that's what people do. It's the same when I go to dinner. When I go to dinner, whether it's with you guys or I go to dinner with my family, I turn my phone upside down.
Yep.
The ringer is off, and I don't look at it. And when we're leaving, I'll look at it and go, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, or if I'm at a business dinner and I'm wearing a jacket, it goes in the breast pocket, and I don't look at it. I'm engaged with you. So when I'm on a Zoom call or doing a show or whatever it might be, or I am engaged with that person, my phone is upside down, my laptop is off. It's just this little 12 or 13-inch screen. That's what I'm engaged with. So you get my full 1000%. And I think that's part of what people don't understand, is that you have to do that, because I know when I'm talking to someone and they're like,
you can tell.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, why am I even talking? You're wasting my time. And that's the worst thing in the world.
That's also, so that plays off to, I mean, Elon Musk maybe takes it a little too extreme for some people. I think it's a great idea, which
Ponzi
is
scheme boy.
Step out, just to say, step out of a meeting if you're not adding any value to it, if there's no reason for you to be there. I think you can politely decline before a meeting too, and really just use the etiquette to say, do I really need to be at this meeting? Do you really need me there? Is there really something I can add? Because you don't want to waste anybody's time. And when you have 10 people on a call, do you really need everybody there? That's a big question. Some calls you do, but many calls I've noticed at other organizations you don't.
Yeah,
we used to do noisy.
Sorry, it's this obsession with that everybody has to be there, you know, of course you have to be on that meeting. Yeah, why? You know, because I'm just sitting there. Yeah, why? Well, but would be, because of this, that, and everything else. Well, yeah, but does it directly affect, what I need to do? I mean, the amount of meetings that I've had to do in the past, physical meetings, where I'd much rather have been out selling,
Mm-hmm.
and the meeting will end up talking about the fact of why aren't you selling enough?
Right. Right.
I said, yeah, because I spent half my
Right.
time listening to people who haven't got a brain between them telling me that I should go out and sell more. Yeah, well, let me go out and do it then.
Let me do the work.
Yeah, because
Well, and you know what's really
sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
no, go. No, go ahead.
Well, like I say, it's just one of those things. Why do I have to be? Oh, yeah. What's the other word? Oh, you can just sit in on that.
Right.
Well, if
Right.
I'm just sitting in, I don't have a contribution. I'm supposed to be sitting in because I'm supposed to be learning something. Well, I never learned anything by sitting in on something.
Right.
Well, it's just me. I'd much rather be out making mistakes
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
coming back and talking about them and talking to people who've
Well,
made that mistake before and saying, well, look, this is this. That's was a lot more value than watching. How could I ever be a carpenter if I just watched other people chipping away at bits of wood and I never had a hammer and chisel myself?
yep.
Crazy.
We have,
But
as part
that's
of,
an old school. That's an old school mentality. And usually the young kids that run
Well,
meetings today have never sold. They've never gone out. They've never done. They got a degree, and because someone's older, we don't know anything. And then the 20 or 30-year-olds are like telling you how it is, and you're like, "What the hell are you talking? Have you ever done anything?"
mm,
Just they went to school and they whatever, and they don't realize that all these other people have years of experience that can actually help them. And sometimes they have great ideas, but for the most part, they read it all in a book and they haven't done anything. And that's
yeah,
a bad thing too. Like you have to have somebody that
experiential,
instills confidence. Yeah.
the
yeah. I'm
experiential
not
element
saying
is huge
I'm
too.
not saying that just because I'm because I'm old and crusty that I know better than someone who's just come out of university. I'm not saying
You
that at
probably do.
all. But because like you said, these people come out with a fresh mind. They come out with absolutely no
Hmm.
baggage whatsoever and no fear. And that's how you put rockets into space because you don't fear that it's going to fall
Mm,
back on your head. You know, um,
I don't agree with that. I think they do come out with a lot of fear because they're all little pussies now. None of them have balls because they were told they weren't allowed to have balls in university. And their mommies and daddy told them that don't offend anybody and don't do this and that. So I disagree with that. I think they come out with ideas. I think they're just scared. And I think there's a handful that'll come out and be like, we're going to take over the world, where the others are like, I'm just scared. I don't want to offend people. And unfortunately, in business, it's the real world. It's okay to offend, within reason, right? I'm not saying be racial slurs on. I'm saying, but if you have to call, if you will, you have to call someone out, you call them out, and you've got to move it forward, and you've got to be able to
yeah,
mentor and this and that.
yeah,
So somebody that has no clue does me no good. And the fact that I don't care if you have 42 degrees, if you've never done anything, it doesn't help me because I can tell you something and you're gonna be like, I don't know, I've never done that. But everybody else has. So I disagree. It's great that they teach them this make believe crap at university, but the real world is where you're going to learn.
well,
That's a
we talked about
foundation.
that on one of the earlier shows, is just how you
Hmm.
can use your fresh perspective to
Right.
to add value, but it still comes from not a level of deference, but a level of observation. And you do have to have a critical mind to come fresh to an organization, whether you have a lot of experience
Correct.
or little experience, to come to an organization and be willing to. And you're right, you have to overcome, if there are fears about offending or rocking the boat, you have to overcome that. But you have to be willing to step out and step up and make that. I mean, in a way, it's putting yourself. Uh, it's putting yourself out there, and maybe that's an art that you're saying that lots of people, young people in particular, maybe aren't doing. I think that it's hard to generalize because there are a lot of young people. If you look at the creator community, people who are creating content, who after having some success in doing some things, they're actually getting out there. So I think it's hard to generalize, but I see what you're saying, is that there is a lot
Yeah.
of fear in particularly the young generation to want to offend or to step on any toes.
And I think if you
yeah.
look
But
at
if
the
you
creator content, a lot of it's just nothing. Like there's no whatever, right? They're doing like If
No
you go into
subs-
Instagram or whatever, it's like, look at me dance, look at me do this. It's all me, 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 me. You're not contributing, you're not helping, you're not doing it. They're doing it for the likes and they're doing it for the whatever. And they want to be Instagram or YouTube famous. So I don't look at them as contributing or doing it. They're not really getting out there because they're not talking to anybody. Once again, it's just them. So
Mm,
there's no, I'm doing this. Like, you want to contribute, do this. But then they would have to actually talk to somebody.
right.
And in their videos, they don't talk to anybody. They just dance or do something silly. And they're cute, but it doesn't teach you or do anything. It just teaches you, like, oh, just get my phone, I make pictures of myself, and hopefully people like me.
Well,
And I don't get that.
it is said that I saw a study that said something like more than 50% of people under 25 want to be an influencer. They aspire
Yep.
to be a so-called influencer, and it's kind of it's sad to see that, because to be a real influencer, you just go out and do it. You do things
Hmm.
that make a difference in your community or make a difference in other people's lives, and that's how you have influence. I don't understand the concept of just wanting to be an influencer for the sake of being it.
Because it started with the Kardashians on the E channel getting, and Paris Hilton and all them getting paid to do nothing. And what
Mm,
does an influencer do? Gets paid to do nothing.
nothing.
And even in the car community, we talked about this with, I think, Brown Car Guy. Influencers are great. They now go review cars, and I don't care what any of them say. I don't care because you're not a car person. So when I look at a
Right.
car on YouTube, I only go, there's four guys I listen to because why? They're automotive journalists. I understand what they're telling me. And I'm like, oh, okay, this car's crap. This car doesn't handle. This car doesn't do this. This car doesn't do that. And then I hear what all four of them say. If they all say the same thing, I'm like, good. Sometimes they have a difference of opinion. And then I may find somebody who's owned it for a year. But an influencer, some little 20 or 30-year-old, something like, it's just great and it's pretty. And look at the doors. I don't care. I want to know how it performs. I want to know about the engine. I want to know about special things. And car companies now are getting away from the automotive journalists and giving it more to influencers, which for guys like me that are car enthusiasts does them no good.
Mm,
Jewelry companies are using the influencers. Da, da, da. So we're getting into a world where anything longer than 35 or 40 seconds, people have no
yeah,
interest. And
that's
that's why it's the dumbing down of America and the dumbing down of the globe. And I think the Chinese with TikTok, which we're on, full disclosure, are laughing all the way to the bank. And they're right because people just don't have an attention span. Like I read the Financial Times and Financial Times every morning, the Economist every Friday morning.
But how do you
It
get
takes a few
people?
hours, and I like that.
So how do you shift? So how do we shift people to thinking to actually valuing true expertise, as opposed to they can talk well on a camera, but they have no background or experience with that thing? I mean, that's the due diligence that we've talked about on the show. That if you're a consumer of information and you're watching an influencer or you're spending your time watching someone on YouTube, I think the question is, where are you getting your content? Being very critical of where you're getting your content. This goes especially for even people at work. I mean, I know that people are using ChatGPT to help themselves at work, but I hope that they also know that you need to double check whatever ChatGPT tells you, because it's not always accurate. And I hope the people using that realize that is that you have to check your sources, whether you're doing it, whether you're
I
watching a video or doing chat GPT.
I don't think people care, Michael. I think we're in a world today. And David knows this. I get a contract, and my wife knows this as well. I read every word,
That's right.
every word. You know this as well. I
Yeah.
read every word, and I'll say, "What about this? What about?" And people hate me. Don't care. When I was starting my career, I used to have a guy. This is before computers. We had to type stuff. And I
Yeah.
remember he used to put a vulgar word, and I've told you guys a story in the
Yeah.
contract to see if anybody actually read it. And he said, "You know how many people sign contracts with like an FU in it that no one ever read?" He said, "We'd correct it later." It
Yeah.
just shows people never read it. I read everything. Because not that I don't trust people, which I don't, but I don't trust what they're writing because there's going to be mistakes and they're going to put verbiage in there that's wrong and blah, blah. And it's like the problem is people just are like the terms and conditions, like just say for Apple, I've skinned it. I'm not reading 7,000 pages, and they know that, right?
And
No
you
one's
know,
going to read it because you would never
well,
click the
you're not
button,
going to
and you
click
would
the
never
20.
use any technology, right? I would never use my phone, my laptop. I would never use anything. But when you send me a legal document,
Oh yeah.
or you send me something else, that's a little different. And I read everything, and I'm shocked at like non-disclosures and that people don't read anything. They just sign it. And I'm like, seriously, you're signing this? And so to go to your thing, unfortunately, the society we're growing up in today, if you take longer than 30 seconds, people are like, what's going on? I'm like, I tell my people, you take 5 hours. I don't care how long it takes you to read it.
Well,
You have to read and understand. And people don't want to learn anymore. People don't read books. They don't read
is
the
it
newspaper. Where do they get their news? TikTok and Facebook, and no one reads. And that's the other problem.
is it too much? Is there a level of too much trust in the people that we're getting information from? And I say that because
No friggin' way. Are you kidding?
well, that's the thing. I mean, I've made a mistake at the office where I didn't check someone's work. I just took their word for it, and that was a mistake because I should have. I thought of it as, and Nushan and I talked about this, as constant consciousness. Just having constant consciousness in when you're dealing with anybody, so that you're not just taking someone's word for it. You're really double checking to make sure that what they're saying is correct, even if it's somebody that you trust. Reagan said it, trust but verify. And maybe that's the other half of it, is thinking maybe are there some people that are just too trusting of sources just because it comes from a big name or a big publication.
Yeah, people are just inherently, my grandfather and father used to say it all the time, people are just stupid. So like when I was a kid, they made me read the paper. They made me watch PBS, the Wall Street
Oh
Journal
yeah.
report and all this stuff. And they would say to me, they go, you listen, and then you have to now read and understand. So like I said, when I want to go get a car, I watch and read. I watch the four guys I trust. I read everything on it, not anything I can get, and I read. I'm like, okay. So when I go in there, I know more about the car than probably the engineer who built it, and I'm okay with that. It's the same in business. I read the agreement. If someone told me about a law, and then I have to go research it. I want to hear what my attorney says, but I also want to research it myself. But I'm not going to like whatever. I'm going to go to the state. I'm going to go find the law, and I'm going to read it. And it's
Read,
so
I'm
read
with you
it,
on that.
read it. I'm going to go to the source. I'm not
Well,
going to go to like,
that's the
YouTube and
first,
something.
that's the primary source. And I'm really glad you brought
Right.
that up, because there are so many situations where people think it's enough just to read the article about the law. And then when you actually
Right.
go read the law, you realize the article itself was misleading or not correct or missing a part of it or just incomplete. And you got to go to your primary sources. So another tip of advice to the people listening to the show is, if you're not already somebody who goes to primary sources, become that person, because that sets you apart. If you're somebody who goes to the source and says, is this really what it says?
Yeah, especially if you're going to start quoting it to somebody. Like if I'm going to put it into a
Oh yeah.
presentation, I better know what I'm talking about. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to read 10,000 things and go, by the way, and somebody goes, that's wrong. I'll be like, no, because I went to the whatever. And the guy go, I read the whatever newspaper. I'll be like, that's great. But
Yeah.
the newspaper left out these 75 points. And in these 75 points, that's that. And they're like, oh. And that's a diff. So when you present something, whether remote or in person, you have to know it better than the guy who wrote
Yes.
it. And that's what people don't do. Like they just throw it out there. And what I've
Yeah.
noticed at presentations, most people don't pay attention anyway, right? They're on their phone, they're doodling. You could say the dumbest stuff, put up the stupidest slide. No one pays attention. Once again, I listen, I take notes. I want a copy of it. I want to read it later. So, and people don't do that. And I think the art of business, because everyone's like, oh, look at the technology and you're a dinosaur and you're this. That's okay. I'll be a dinosaur because I still get A through Z done, usually quicker and better than anybody else because I'm old school. And the young kids will get it done. I'm like, great, it's wrong. Go do this. Go correct that. Go do this. And they don't understand why. It's like, but look what I did. I'm like, I don't care. Do it right. And I think doing it right is important. And I don't think people understand do it right the first time.
That's true.
Not the 12th time. And I think that's the other thing is they just don't get that,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that we're in a world of hurry along, You know, and it's in a lot of people's
Yep.
interest that you don't take time.
Mm.
You know, it's make that quick decision, make that quick purchase, quick.
Right.
If you don't do it, somebody else does. You know, there's continuous, you know, being hounded to do stuff. But going back to the point you made about checking everything, if you can't remember, you know, why I should be doing it, there's a wonderful old phrase they use in England. It's called belt and braces. So it'll be belt and I don't know what braces are in the US, but brutal. Yeah, but I don't know what the word is.
Suspenders, like suspenders.
You
But
mean
yeah, so
suspenders?
yeah,
I call them braces. I call them braces too. So we're good.
yeah. So it's a belt. It's a belt. So both. Because that way you're never going to be caught with your trousers down, and
Yeah.
it's so you have to consciously start your working day by dressing properly, and
Mm.
that means checking it, going back, looking at it again, you know, not hurrying things along. I mean, the beginning of this show was a classic example of hurry, and me not checking everything because I got the graphics all wrong to start our new
Well,
show off.
you were doing a sermon for the Church of London because it's
That's
apparently
that's
because
that's
you're
that's
just
what
like
it
a
was.
priest
Yeah,
today, so
that's what
that's
it
why.
was. So
So
yeah, so you know, it's I have to sometimes you have to practice what you preach, and I wasn't very good at doing
preach,
that
yeah,
today. Yeah.
Well, and that's
So
yeah.
no, maybe that's something else too. Is that I mean, we give a lot of. I think we get a lot of really good insights and tips on this show because it's coming from a lot of experience and seeing it firsthand. But I also think for the people listening, I mean, there has to be a level of knowing where you are and
Mhm.
accepting where you are and not beating yourself up over mistakes so that you can correct as quickly as possible. Because the key is that correction when you do make an error, when you do go down the wrong path. The key is that how do you react to that? Do you wallow in it? No, you correct it and move on.
You have to learn from your mistakes, and I think a big thing today is people don't do that. I think they get offended, like you say something's wrong, and people are like, "Oh my God!" It goes back to what we've always talked about. When mommy told them they were special when they came in third, or fifth, or
Mm.
300th, and they got a trophy for participating. Like I said, when I grew up as a kid, if you came in other than first, you got nothing. So as we became adults, and someone said, "Hey, this is wrong, fix it," you're like, oh, "Okay, what do I need to do to make it better?" Now kids are like, "What do you mean it's not perfect?" My mommy would say, "I don't really care what your mommy says. I'm not your mommy. Make it perfect, make it right." But so when we mentor people, that's the first thing I say to them. I said, "You're not going to like 95% that comes out of my mouth. If you survive it, you will be a rock star
Mm.
down the road." And the people that I've mentored over the years that survived are now rock stars in their positions
Mm.
that they held because, like, one of the girls told me, she said, "You were brutal." But
Mhm.
she said, because of that, now I have no fear, no this, no that. I can go and tackle. When my boss says, "Go do this," she's like, "No problem. Like,
Mhm.
whatever you need." And
Mhm.
she said, other my peers of my age, my colleagues cannot because they didn't have somebody that mentored them. Like she said, like you mentored me. She
Mhm.
said when she would do
yeah,
something wrong, she was in marketing, and I'd be like, "What is this crap? Do this. Get on the phone." And she's like, "The phone." I'm like, "Get on the phone. Stop texting."
Mm.
And she's like, "Okay." And she was terrified. Like the first week, you could tell. I thought she was going to break down into tears, and then she realized it wasn't going to kill her, and she learned to do it. And she's like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And so she says, when I mentor people, she says, I mentor them just like you mentored me. She says, sometimes a little nicer. She said, but the same premise. And she says, I'm building my own little army. And I go, "Bella, that's what you have to
Wow.
do." But
Yeah.
she got the job because in her interview, the guy said something and she literally said, "That's wrong. I would never do it that way." And told him exactly how she would do it. He's like,
Mhm.
"Wow,
Mhm.
where'd you learn that?" And she said, "My old boss. He always used to say," meaning me, "you kick in the door, you always go forward. You don't go around, you don't go up, you don't go down,
Mhm.
you go forward. We fix the mistake and we keep going forward." And she said, "That's my motto." And she lives by, and she teaches her team that. And she said, "Then I mentor him like you mentored me." And I think that's the thing. Mentors today are worried about hurting Johnny or Sally's feelings.
Well,
I'm
and
not
then
worried about your feelings. I don't care. If you don't like it, leave. If you don't want to be mentored, quit. I don't care. And I think that's the problem. And now, especially, right? Everyone's like, "I don't want to work. I only want to work 3 days a week." As long as you get your job done, I don't care. But you still have to mentor them, whether it's the guy who
Mhm.
mops the
It's
floor or it's the guy who runs $1 billion company. They still all need some sort of a mentor that says, "Yeah, that's kind of stupid. Why are you doing that? Or do you think about this?" And that's a big
it's
thing,
really
which I don't
important.
think people do today.
It's
Yeah.
really important to get feedback in an organization, and
Yeah.
and also to be not just the recipient of it, but be able to pass on whatever you're learning to whoever is around you as well. Because people that we might be talking to on this show, maybe they're individual contributors, maybe they're managers, but they're interacting with people who probably could take their advice too. So you've got to be willing to call out wrong whenever you see it, regardless of who it is, and then correct it, because you're part of a team, you're part of an organization, you're part of a mission, and you have to do it. You have to go forward, as you say.
Well, even here, we have a mentor, and we'll talk to him every couple of weeks, and he'll be like, well, here's what you did wrong this time. We're like, okay, we make
Yeah.
all the notes. And then the next show, David and I will do exactly what he said. And then he'll look at it, he goes, that's great. You've corrected all of that. You still suck on this. And I'm like, great, we'll correct that. So it's like, we give us our baby steps. So it's like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And we've gone back to our first shows and we look and we're like, oh yeah, we see how crappy those were. Not knowing what we were doing, like, this is great. And now this is show 115, I think, with you today. And we're like, wow, we're getting better at this. Like, we're learning how to do certain things, keep it tight. So mentors are important at every stage in life, because as much as you think you know nothing. And that even goes, I know people that know me will be shocked. Even for me, I learn every single day, because as much as I know, I only know, as one of my friends used to say in Partners, I only know what I know. And that's it. Like, I'm not common sense wise. If there's a puddle, I just walk through it. I don't understand why we're walking around it. That's what shoes are for. So there's certain things I just don't get. And people that mentor me go, if you do this, you'll be like, oh, that's really cool. And same with the show. So you do that even in business, even in life. And I think that's where people fall short, is they all think they know everything. They know absolutely nothing. And there's always somebody smarter. And they may not be smarter than, maybe they know something you don't know. And that little you don't know will help you propel yourself to whatever the next level is. And I think that's important. I don't think people understand that, which is kind of sad. So
it is important. And I know, Stephen, you're very strong on the mentoring side of it, but having worked with you for a year, you always listen. And you give feedback, positive and negative, because feedback should be both positive and negative. But you always listen. It's not like there's no space to communicate, because that's the thing that stifles all creativity and all desire to work at a company where whatever you say just gets snuffed out like a candle. You have to give people the space to say whatever they got to say, and then and also create the harmony that you can say, okay, well, that's a good idea, and actually that's not, and you did that well, but actually you didn't do that well, without just fear setting in.
Right.
So,
and that's why this show is important, because I think it's going to teach people that it's okay to say yes and no, teach them how to get mentored, teach them about business in general, whether it be remote, you're in person, or whatever it is. I think it's going to be important that they'll be able to see all of this, and they're going to be like, this is cool. I get it. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to get it. And also, people that are listening in the comments, and practice it. You get in the comments section. If you want us to talk about a specific topic, feel free. Because really, the reason we changed the name of the show to the Lost Dollar Business Club is because we're not just going to talk about remote work and work. We're going to talk about other things in business that affect you as an employee, an employer, and just business globally. So it's just not going to be about one thing, because we used to go off on tangents, which we'll probably still do.
Well, now
we figure might as well
part of the course.
Right. Right. It's all part of everything. And Michael's company is sponsoring his own show, which is, and I know I massacre the name, Michael. So what's the name?
Well, Bendicoot is because it's
Bendicoot.
bend your life around the world. Because
Right.
working in remote tech, you can work from anywhere.
Right.
And Bendicoot.com gives you the courses, which are nearly complete, gives you the courses in order to master your remote tech career. So it helps you get into the tech industry in a non-technical way. And it also teaches you how to get the job, how to interview, and then how to master your remote tech career. And it includes a lot of the ideas that we've talked to on the show and more. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you guys.
And also, boys and girls, if looking below, podcast, you probably won't see my finger, but podcast and on YouTube, if you look below, there's a link to Bendicoot. And I think if I'm not mistaken, if you say you saw it on Two Old Farts or
That's right.
TOF, Michael's giving you a discount.
That's
And
right.
Michael will be back every Friday with a new show. And we will teach you something, hopefully. And if not, then don't tell anybody. But if you learn something and you think it's valuable, tell all your friends, make your employees
the
listen
word.
to the show, subscribe and like. And we appreciate all of you. Michael, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Michael.
Mr. David, do we have an ending for the Lost Dollar Business Club show?
We do, we do, and I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. So, thank you
All
everybody
right, well, let's find out.
All
for
right,
being
let's
with
see.
us today. And this is, yeah, we are learning on the fly, and don't be afraid to, you know, to get up and do something like this, because it may work
There you
today,
go.
the exit, or it may not. But hopefully the next time on the next Friday when we come back and talk to Michael on his show, that yeah, it'll be a little bit more together.
It'll be more better.
Anyway,
It'll be more better. Right?
more better. That's the word I'm looking for.
More better.
So
There you
yeah,
go.
here we go.